Excuse me, what's going on?
Oh, Claire, you're home.
Mom, why are there movers at my house?
Perfect timing. They're almost finished.
Finished with what? That's my dresser!
Relax, sweetheart. Everything is under control.
Under control? Mom, tell me what's happening. Claire, I'm so sorry. Sorry for what?
Emma, why are your bags here?
Mom?
Emma and Jake lost their apartment yesterday.
Okay, and?
They needed somewhere to stay.
Okay.
They live here now.
What?
It's only temporary.
Temporary?
Until they get back on their feet.
Mom, you never asked me. There wasn't
Family
time.
helps family.
Your mom told us she'd already spoken to you. You told them I agreed?
I knew you would.
No, you decided for me. Wait, where are you taking that?
Upstairs, ma'am. Master bedroom.
Emma needs more space for Lily.
That's my bedroom.
You'll be comfortable in the guest room.
You're giving away my bedroom? This is my house. Nobody asked me. Not one person.
Welcome to Nenya Folk Tales, where every story teaches you about betrayal, karma, love, and life lessons. If you love emotional stories with crazy twists, subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss a new story every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday by 8 p.m. Now, let's get into today's story. My name is Claire Bennett. I'm 36 years old, and 3 weeks ago, I became the first person in my family to buy a home. There was no husband paying half the bills, no inheritance, no lottery ticket. Just 15 years of working long hours as a hospital administrator, skipping vacations, wearing old clothes, driving an aging Honda, and saving every extra dollar I earned. While my friends traveled across Europe and posted pictures from luxury resorts, I worked overtime. While they bought new cars and designer handbags, I packed my lunch every day and reminded myself that every sacrifice brought me one step closer to my dream. That dream wasn't a mansion. It was peace. A place where nobody could tell me what to do. A place where I could finally close my front door after a stressful day and breathe. The day I signed the closing papers, I cried in the parking lot. Not because I was overwhelmed by the paperwork, but because I had finally proven to myself that hard work really could change a person's life. My house sat on a quiet street outside Denver. It had white siding, blue shutters, a beautiful maple tree in the front yard, and 4 bedrooms. Everyone kept asking me why a single woman needed 4 bedrooms. My answer was always simple: because I earned them. One room would become my office. One would become my reading room. The guest room would stay available whenever I decided to invite someone into my home. The choice would always be mine. Or at least, that's what I believed. The day before this happened, I invited my family over for a small housewarming barbecue. Nothing fancy, just grilled chicken, potato salad, homemade peach cobbler, and music playing softly in the backyard. Everyone congratulated me. My uncle said Dad would have been proud. My cousins admired every room. But my mother didn't seem interested in celebrating. She walked through the house slowly, carefully studying every room. She stood inside the guest room for nearly a minute before saying, "This room could easily fit a crib." I laughed. "Mom, I'm not planning to have children." She smiled but said nothing. Then she walked into my office. "Does anyone really need an office this big?" "I do," I answered with a smile. She simply nodded before walking into the master bedroom. Standing by the window, she looked across the backyard and quietly said, "This room feels lonely." At the time, I thought she was making another one of her harmless comments. Looking back now, I realized she wasn't imagining my future. She was planning someone else's. Emma had always been Mom's favorite. Growing up, nothing was ever Emma's fault. If she failed a test, the teacher was unfair. If she crashed Mom's car, the roads were dangerous. If she spent too much money, life had been stressful. Every mistake came with an excuse. By the age of 28, she'd worked at 8 different jobs. She loved expensive clothes, luxury handbags, and posting perfect family pictures online, even though she was constantly borrowing money from relatives. Her husband, Jake, couldn't have been more different. He worked construction during the day and delivered food at night. Every time I saw him, he looked exhausted, but he never complained. He loved Emma deeply and wanted to give his family a better life. Unfortunately, love can't fix someone who's never been forced to face the consequences of their choices. Standing in my driveway, I watched another mover carry my dresser toward the front door. Looked back at my mother. "You told them they could move into my house." She smiled proudly, as though she'd solved everyone's problems. "I already gave them your spare key." In that moment, I realized something that hurt more than I could explain. My mother didn't see this house as something I had earned. She saw it as family property that she had every right to share without asking me. She had already made the decision. She had already given away my privacy, and she had absolutely no idea that the next words out of my mouth were about to change this family forever. Claire stared at her mother, trying to convince herself this had to be some kind of misunderstanding. "You gave them my spare key?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her mother smiled as though she'd done something generous. "Of course. I knew you wouldn't leave your own sister homeless." Claire looked at Emma, hoping someone would admit this had all gone too far. Instead, Emma wiped away her tears and quietly said, "Mom told us everything was already settled." Claire felt her chest tighten. Settled. Nobody called me. Nobody asked me. This is my house. Before anyone could answer, Jake walked over carrying another heavy box. Sweat dripped down his forehead, and he avoided looking Claire in the eyes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I wanted to call you myself, but your mom kept saying she had already talked to you." Claire looked at her mother in disbelief. "You told them you had my permission?" Her mother folded her arms. "I knew what your answer should be. Sometimes a mother has to make difficult decisions for her family." Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You made a decision with something that doesn't belong to you." Her mother's smile faded. "Don't start acting selfish, Claire. Your sister is going through one of the hardest moments of her life." Claire laughed bitterly. "Selfish. I worked 15 years for this house." Emma suddenly burst into tears. "Can we please not do this outside? The neighbors are watching." Claire glanced across the street. Curtains were moving. People were already watching the scene unfold. She closed her eyes for a second and took a deep breath. She didn't want the first memory in her new neighborhood to be a family argument in the driveway. "Everyone go inside," she said firmly. "We'll talk after the movers leave." Her mother smiled again as if she had won. "That's better. I knew you'd calm down." Claire said nothing. She simply walked into her own house, but it no longer felt like hers. Every room echoed with voices that didn't belong there. Moving boxes covered the hallway. Emma's clothes were already hanging over the staircase. Lily's toys were scattered across the living room floor. Claire stood silently in the kitchen while the movers continued bringing in furniture. She noticed something that made her stomach sink even further. Family photographs. Her mother had packed framed pictures from Emma's apartment and was placing them on Claire's fireplace mantel. "Mom," Claire said slowly, "why are you decorating my house?" Her mother didn't even look embarrassed. "It'll help Lily feel at home." Claire walked over and picked up one of the frames. It was Emma and Jake on their wedding day. Without saying a word, she placed it back into the box. "Nothing gets unpacked until we have this conversation." Her mother frowned. "Claire, I mean it." The room fell silent. Jake immediately stopped opening another box. "She's right," he said quietly. "Let's wait." Emma looked frustrated. "Where are we supposed to put Lily's things?" Claire pointed toward the guest room. "Everything stays in the guest room until we figure this out." Her mother shook her head. "That's ridiculous. They need the master bedroom." Claire slowly turned toward her. "No, I need the master bedroom. I bought this house." For the first time all afternoon, her mother didn't have an answer. An hour later, the movers finally left. The front door closed, and silence filled the house. Claire looked around. Her dream home now looked like a storage unit. Boxes were stacked everywhere. Suitcases blocked the hallway. She couldn't even see her dining table anymore. Her mother cleared her throat. Now let's sit down like adults. Claire remained standing. Fine. Here's my first question. How long are they planning to stay? Emma looked at Jake. Jake looked at the floor. Finally, her mother answered. As long as they need. Claire blinked. That's not an answer. They'll stay until they're financially stable. Claire let out a slow breath. Do you know how long that could be? Emma crossed her arms. We're trying our best, Claire. Then tell me the plan. Emma looked uncomfortable. Jake is working extra shifts. Claire nodded. Good. And you? Emma hesitated. My hours at the boutique were reduced. Jake quietly looked down again. Claire noticed his reaction immediately. Something wasn't adding up. Reduced? She asked. Emma nodded quickly. Business has been slow. Jake opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but he stopped himself. Claire noticed it, but she let it go for now. She looked back at her mother. You should have asked me before making promises. Her mother's face hardened. If I had asked, you would have said no. Claire answered without hesitation. You're right. I probably would have. Because this is my house. Her mother slammed her hand on the kitchen counter. Listen to yourself. All this talk about my house. When did you become so obsessed with possessions? Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. Possessions? This isn't about possessions. It's about respect. Emma suddenly spoke through tears. Maybe we should have just slept in the car. Claire's heart softened for a moment. She looked at little Lily, coloring quietly at the kitchen table, completely unaware of the tension surrounding her. Claire loved her niece. None of this was Lily's fault. She took another deep breath and forced herself to stay calm. I'm not asking anyone to sleep in a car, but we're going to have rules if you're staying here. Before she could continue, her mother interrupted. Nobody needs rules. They're family. Claire slowly looked at her mother and realized this wasn't just about Emma moving in. This was about something much bigger. As long as her mother believed family meant having unlimited access to everything Claire had worked for, this problem would never end. And deep inside, Claire had the uncomfortable feeling that this was only the beginning. The next morning, Claire woke up earlier than usual. For a few peaceful seconds, she forgot everything that had happened. Then she heard footsteps above her head. She frowned. Above her head, her bedroom was upstairs. She sat upright in bed, before remembering that she had spent the night in the guest room, because Emma had refused to move after putting Lily to sleep. Claire had been too exhausted to argue. She quietly walked into the hallway and climbed the stairs. The master bedroom door was closed. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. Emma finally opened the door, still wearing pajamas. Morning, she said casually. Claire looked past her. Her bedroom no longer looked like her bedroom. Emma's clothes filled the closet. Makeup covered Claire's dresser. Lily's stuffed animals were scattered across the king-size bed. Even Claire's framed graduation photo had been replaced with a family picture of Emma, Jake, and Lily. Claire felt something break inside her. Emma, she said calmly, I told everyone yesterday that nothing was supposed to be unpacked. Emma shrugged. Lily cried all night. She needed to feel comfortable. Claire walked into the room and picked up her graduation photo from a cardboard box sitting in the corner. This is my room. Emma crossed her arms. Mom said you'd understand. Claire slowly turned toward her sister. Stop saying that. Mom doesn't get to decide what happens in my house. Before Emma could respond, Lily ran into Claire's arms. Aunt Claire, she said happily. Claire hugged her tightly. None of this was the little girl's fault. She kissed Lily's forehead before setting her down gently. Sweetheart, can you go see Daddy for a minute? Lily smiled and ran downstairs. As soon as she disappeared, Claire looked back at Emma. By tonight, everything you've unpacked needs to go back into boxes. You're staying in the guest room. That's final. Emma rolled her eyes. You're acting like I'm stealing your life. No, Claire replied quietly. I'm protecting it. Emma laughed bitterly. You've always been dramatic. Claire didn't answer. She picked up another box containing her personal belongings and carried it downstairs. Jake was in the kitchen making coffee before leaving for work. The moment he saw the box in Claire's hands, he understood exactly what had happened. "She unpacked?" he asked. Claire nodded. Jake rubbed his forehead in frustration. "I told her to wait." Emma walked downstairs a few seconds later. "Can you stop making me sound like a criminal?" Jake sighed. "Nobody's doing that, Emma." "Really?" "Because that's exactly how everyone is treating me." Claire placed the box on the dining table. "Nobody's treating you like a criminal. I'm asking you to respect my home." Emma threw her hands into the air. "Everything is always about your house." "Because we're standing inside my house," Claire replied. Before Emma could argue again, the front door opened. Claire turned in surprise. "Mom?" Judith walked in, carrying shopping bags full of groceries, as though she owned the place. "Good morning, everyone," she said cheerfully. Claire stared at her. "How did you get in?" Judith smiled. "I used the spare key." Claire's face went cold. She walked straight toward her mother and held out her hand. "Give me the key." Judith blinked. "What?" "The spare key. Give it to me." Emma immediately stepped forward. "Claire, seriously?" Claire didn't even look at her. "Mom, hand me the key." Judith slowly pulled the key from her purse. "I was only trying to help." Claire took it without another word and slipped it into her pocket. Judith looked offended. "You don't trust your own mother," Claire answered calmly. "This isn't about trust. It's about boundaries." Jake quietly nodded to himself while pretending to drink his coffee. Claire noticed it. So did Emma. "Whose side are you on?" Emma snapped at her husband. Jake looked at her with tired eyes. "There aren't sides, Emma. Claire has every right to decide who has keys to her house." Emma looked shocked. "Even you agree with her?" Jake didn't answer immediately. He looked around the beautiful kitchen, the new hardwood floors, the sunlight pouring through the windows. Then he quietly said, "She worked for all of this. We didn't." The room became silent. Eleanor looked disappointed. Emma looked betrayed. Claire simply stood there holding the spare key in her hand, realizing that Jake might be the only person in the room who truly understood what this house meant to her. But she had no idea that before the day was over, she would discover a secret that would completely change the way she saw her sister's situation. Claire spent the rest of the morning trying to focus on work, but she couldn't stop thinking about Jake's expression. When he defended her, it hadn't sounded forced. It sounded like someone who had been carrying a heavy secret for a long time. That evening, she arrived home just after 6. The house was unusually quiet. Lily was asleep on the couch, and Emma was nowhere in sight. Jake was sitting alone at the kitchen island, with a stack of unpaid bills spread out in front of him. He quickly gathered them into a folder when he noticed Claire. "Sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to leave everything out." Claire set her purse down. "It's okay." She poured herself a glass of water before looking at him. "Can I ask you something?" Jake nodded. "Yesterday, when I asked Emma about her job, you looked like you wanted to say something." Jake stared at the folder for several seconds. "I probably shouldn't." "Why not?" He sighed heavily. "Because she's my wife." Claire pulled out a chair across from him. "I'm not trying to attack her, Jake. I just want to understand what's really happening." Jake leaned back in his chair and rubbed his tired eyes. "Emma didn't lose hours because business is slow." Claire remained silent. "She lost them because she kept showing up late." Claire wasn't surprised, but hearing it confirmed hurt anyway. "How late?" she asked. "Sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. A few weeks ago, she didn't show up at all because she overslept after staying out with her friends." Claire looked down at the floor. "She told Mom the boutique cut everyone's hours." Jake gave a sad smile. "That's what she tells everyone." Claire looked back at him. "What really happened with the apartment?" Jake's shoulders dropped. "The rent wasn't raised." Claire frowned. "What?" "The landlord didn't increase the rent. We just stopped paying it." Claire felt her stomach tighten. "You couldn't afford it." Jake slowly shook his head. We could have. Claire stared at him in disbelief. Then where did the money go? Jake quietly opened the folder and slid several credit card statements across the table. Claire's eyes widened. Designer clothing stores, luxury cosmetics, online shopping, spa memberships, weekend trips, thousands of dollars in charges. Emma told me they were work expenses, Claire whispered. Jake laughed bitterly. She tells everyone something different. Claire looked at another statement. The balance was overwhelming. Does Mom know about this? Jake shook his head. No. Emma told her we fell behind because my construction company cut my hours. That wasn't true either. Claire slowly looked back at him. You've been working full-time this entire time? More than full-time, Jake answered quietly. Construction during the day. Food delivery almost every night. Weekends too. Claire suddenly understood why he always looked exhausted. Why didn't you tell your mother-in-law the truth? Jake smiled sadly. Because every time I tried, Emma cried. Then your mom would comfort her and tell me she was under too much pressure. Somehow I always became the bad guy. Claire felt a wave of sadness wash over her. You've been carrying this by yourself. Jake nodded. For almost 3 years. Before Claire could respond, the front door opened. Emma walked inside, carrying several shopping bags. Claire frowned immediately. What's that? Emma smiled nervously. Nothing. Jake stood up. Emma. She avoided looking at him. Claire reached for one of the bags before Emma could stop her. Inside was a brand new designer handbag with the price tag still attached. Claire slowly looked up. Emma. Emma crossed her arms. It was on sale. Jake closed his eyes in frustration. We talked about this. I paid with my own credit card. Jake let out a tired laugh. The credit card that's already maxed out? Emma's face changed. Why are you acting like this in front of Claire? Jake didn't answer. Claire quietly held up the shopping bag. You told us you couldn't afford rent. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I deserve to have one nice thing. Claire looked around the kitchen that had become filled with tension once again. Then she realized something even more disturbing. If Emma was still spending money like this while living in someone else's home, then she had no intention of changing, and Claire suddenly understood that this wasn't a temporary problem anymore. It was a pattern that had been allowed to continue for years. Just then, Claire's phone buzzed. It was a message from her mother. I'm stopping by tomorrow morning. We need to discuss something important about the house. Claire read the message twice. A chill ran down her spine. After everything that had happened, the last thing she wanted to hear were the words, about the house. She had a feeling her mother was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Claire barely slept that night. Her mother's message kept replaying in her mind. We need to discuss something important about the house. Every time Judith said they needed to discuss something, it usually meant she had already made a decision and expected everyone else to accept it. The next morning, Claire was drinking her coffee when the front doorbell rang. She opened it to find her mother smiling as if nothing had happened. Good morning, Judith said, walking inside before Claire could invite her. She carried a folder under one arm and a box of pastries in the other. I brought breakfast. Claire closed the door slowly. What do you want to discuss? Judith set the pastries on the kitchen counter. Let's wait until everyone is awake. Claire folded her arms. No. Tell me now. Judith looked slightly annoyed but opened the folder anyway. Inside were several printed papers. She spread them across the island. Claire looked down and frowned. They were rental listings, mortgage information, and budgeting worksheets. What is this? Claire asked. Judith smiled confidently. I've been thinking. Since your house has 4 bedrooms, it doesn't make sense for Emma and Jake to waste money renting another apartment. Claire felt her stomach tighten. What are you saying? I'm saying this house is big enough for everyone. They can stay here permanently. They'll help with groceries when they can, and eventually Lily will have a stable place to grow up. Claire stared at her mother in complete disbelief. Permanently? Judith nodded. It's the smartest solution. Claire couldn't believe what she was hearing. Mom, this isn't a family meeting. This is my house. Before Judith could answer, Emma walked into the kitchen wearing slippers and a sweatshirt. Morning, she mumbled before noticing the papers. Oh, you already showed her? Claire slowly turned toward her sister. You knew about this. Emma looked uncomfortable. Mom mentioned it last night. Claire laughed once, but there was no humor in it. Of course she did. Jake walked in a few seconds later, already dressed for work. The moment he saw the papers, his expression changed. What's going on? Judith smiled proudly. I found the perfect solution. You and Emma don't need to waste money on rent anymore. You can all live here as one family. Jake looked stunned. What? Judith pointed around the house. Claire has plenty of room. Jake immediately shook his head. No. Everyone looked at him. Judith blinked. What do you mean, no? Jake looked directly at his mother-in-law. We are not staying here permanently. Emma stared at him. Jake? He didn't even look at her. No. Claire has already done more than enough. Judith frowned. You're letting your pride get in the way. Jake's voice became firmer. No, I'm protecting what's left of my dignity. The kitchen fell silent. Claire watched him carefully. For the first time since he'd arrived, Jake wasn't apologizing. He wasn't avoiding conflict. He was standing up for himself. Judith looked offended. You two are family. Jake nodded. Exactly. Family shouldn't take advantage of each other. Emma suddenly slammed her hands on the counter. Why is everyone acting like I'm some kind of burden? Claire answered quietly. Because nobody asked me if I wanted roommates. Emma's eyes filled with tears again. You have everything, Claire. A beautiful house, a great career, money in the bank. Why is it so hard for you to help your own sister? Claire looked at her for a long moment before answering. Because helping someone and sacrificing your own peace are two different things. Emma shook her head. You just don't understand. Claire's voice remained calm. No, Emma. I understand perfectly. I understand what it feels like to work late nights. I understand saying no to things you want because you have bigger goals. I understand responsibility. Emma looked away. Jake quietly picked up his lunch bag. I have to get to work. Before leaving, he looked at Claire. Thank you for letting us stay this long. I'm sorry for all of this. Claire nodded. Drive safely. After Jake left, Judith gathered the papers back into the folder. You're making a mistake, Claire. Claire looked her mother straight in the eyes. No, Mom. The mistake was deciding what to do with my home without asking me. Judith picked up her purse. One day you'll need your family too, Claire answered softly. When that day comes, I'll ask for help. I won't expect someone else to surrender their life because I made poor choices. Judith's face hardened. Without another word, she walked toward the front door. Emma followed her outside, crying. Claire stood alone in the kitchen, exhausted. A few minutes later, she heard voices through the open window. She wasn't trying to listen, but one sentence froze her in place. Judith whispered, Don't worry. If Claire won't agree, I'll find another way. Claire slowly walked to the window, but by the time she looked outside, Judith and Emma were already getting into the car. Her heart began racing. Another way? She didn't know what Judith meant, but something told her this wasn't over. Whatever her mother was planning next would be far worse than simply moving Emma into the house. Claire couldn't stop thinking about Judith's words. If Claire won't agree, I'll find another way. They echoed in her mind throughout the day. Judith had never accepted being told no. If she believed she was doing the right thing, she would push until everyone gave in. Claire had lived with that her entire life. This time was different. This wasn't about a family gathering or a holiday dinner. This was her home. That evening, Claire got home earlier than usual. As she pulled into the driveway, she noticed an unfamiliar SUV parked outside. Her stomach tightened. She walked inside and immediately heard voices coming from the living room. Judith was there. So were Aunt Linda, Uncle Robert, cousin Melissa, and 2 other relatives. Everyone stopped talking the moment Claire entered. "Claire," Judith said with a smile. "Perfect timing." Claire looked around the room. "What's going on?" Aunt Linda smiled awkwardly. "Your mom invited us over." Claire slowly turned to Judith. "You invited people into my house without asking me." Judith shrugged. "We're family." Claire took a slow breath. "Mom, this is exactly what I've been trying to explain. You don't get to make decisions in my house." Uncle Robert cleared his throat. "We came because Judith wanted us to help settle things." Claire looked at him in disbelief. "Settle what?" Judith stood confidently. "Everyone deserves to hear both sides." Claire let out a small laugh. "That's interesting, because nobody wanted to hear my side before Emma moved into my house." Emma sat quietly on the couch, refusing to look at Claire. Jake stood near the dining room looking uncomfortable. Judith folded her arms. "Claire thinks I'm being unfair." "No," Claire replied calmly. "I think you crossed a boundary." Aunt Linda spoke softly. "Claire, your sister is having a hard time." Claire nodded. "I know. That's why I opened my home to them. But helping someone doesn't mean they get to take over my life." Melissa spoke next. "Honestly, if I owned a house that big, I'd let my family stay." Claire smiled politely. "Really?" Melissa nodded. "Of course." Claire looked at her. "Then why didn't Mom ask Emma to move into your house?" Melissa's face immediately changed. "Well, my house is smaller." Claire nodded. "Exactly. Everyone is generous when it's someone else's sacrifice." The room became silent. Jake finally spoke. "Can I say something?" Everyone looked at him. Judith sighed but nodded. Jake took a deep breath. "Claire isn't responsible for fixing our mistakes." Emma looked at him in shock. "Jake," he continued, "when we got married, I promised to provide for my family. Claire didn't create our problems. We did." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Please don't do this." Jake reached into his backpack and placed a folder on the coffee table. "I didn't want anyone to know, but I can't keep hiding the truth." He opened the folder. Inside were credit card statements, overdue notices, bank letters, and unpaid rent notices. Aunt Linda picked up one of the papers. Her eyes widened. "Designer handbags?" Uncle Robert grabbed another. "Luxury vacations?" Melissa looked at another statement. "Spa memberships?" The room became completely silent. Judith looked confused. "Emma, what is all this?" Emma couldn't answer. Jake spoke quietly. "We weren't evicted because the landlord increased the rent." Judith stared at him. "What?" "The rent never went up." Judith slowly looked at Emma. "You told me it did." Emma lowered her head. Jake continued. "My hours were never cut either. I've been working construction during the day and food delivery almost every night." Judith's face turned pale. "Then why couldn't you pay rent?" Jake looked at Emma before answering. "Because every month, the money disappeared before the bills were paid." Claire watched her mother's expression change. For the first time, Judith looked completely shocked. "Emma, tell me this isn't true." Tears rolled down Emma's face. "I thought I could fix it before anyone found out." Judith sat down slowly. "You told me Claire didn't understand your situation. You told me life had become too expensive." Emma covered her face with both hands. Jake quietly said, "I kept making excuses because I didn't want anyone to think badly of her." Uncle Robert looked at Claire. "I'm sorry. I judged you before I knew the truth." Aunt Linda nodded. "I owe you an apology too." Melissa looked away, ashamed. Claire didn't feel victorious. She only felt sad. She walked over to Judith and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, this is why I wanted boundaries. I wasn't trying to punish Emma. I was trying to stop this from getting worse." Judith looked up at Claire with tears in her eyes. Before she could respond, Emma suddenly stood up. She pointed angrily at Jake. "You betrayed me." Jake calmly shook his head. "No, Emma. I stopped helping you hide from reality." He reached into his backpack one last time and placed another document on the coffee table. Everyone leaned forward. It was a signed lease agreement. Jake looked directly at Emma. "I found us a studio apartment. I'm moving tomorrow." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "What are you talking about?" Jake's voice remained steady. "You can come with me if you're ready to change. But if you're expecting someone else to keep rescuing us, then I'm going alone." The room fell completely silent. Even Judith didn't know what to say. Claire looked at the lease agreement, then at her sister's terrified face. For the first time, Emma realized that everyone who had protected her was finally stepping back, and she was about to face the consequences of her choices alone. The next morning, the house was quieter than it had been in days. Nobody argued over breakfast. Nobody pretended everything was fine. Emma sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Jake quietly zipped up the last suitcase and carried it to the front door. Lily sat on the couch hugging her favorite teddy bear, too young to understand why her parents weren't speaking. Claire watched from the hallway, her heart heavy. She had wanted peace, but she had never wanted her family to fall apart. Jake walked back into the living room and looked at Emma. "I'm leaving in 30 minutes. Emma didn't respond. Judith stepped closer to her daughter. "Emma, don't rush into anything. You and Lily can stay with me until we figure this out." Jake sighed. "Judith, that's exactly the problem. Every time things get difficult, someone figures it out for Emma." Judith frowned. "She's my daughter." Jake nodded. "I know, but she's also a wife and a mother. She has to start making decisions instead of waiting for someone else to rescue her." Emma finally looked up. "So now everyone thinks I'm a terrible person." Jake sat across from her. "No, I think you've spent years believing there would never be consequences, because someone always stepped in before you had to face them." Tears rolled down Emma's cheeks. "I never wanted any of this." Claire gently spoke for the first time. "I believe you, Emma. But wanting a better life isn't enough. At some point, you have to choose it." Emma looked at her sister with red, swollen eyes. "Do you really think I'm that irresponsible?" Claire didn't answer immediately. "I think you've been protected from the results of your decisions for so long that you've never learned how strong you really are." Emma lowered her head. Judith quietly sat beside her daughter and held her hand. For the first time in years, she didn't argue with Claire. She didn't defend Emma. She simply listened. Jake stood up and picked up his suitcase. "I have to go sign the final paperwork." He looked at Emma one last time. "I'll be at the apartment all day. If you decide you want to build a different future, come with Lily. If not..." He stopped for a moment. "Then this is goodbye." He kissed Lily on the forehead, nodded respectfully at Claire, and walked out the front door. The sound of his car pulling away echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Emma broke down crying. Judith wrapped her arms around her, but this time she didn't promise to fix everything. She didn't offer money. She didn't blame anyone else. Nearly an hour passed before Emma finally stood up. She wiped her tears away and looked at Claire. "Can we talk?" Claire nodded. They walked out to the back porch. The autumn breeze gently moved the leaves across the yard. Emma stared at the garden for several moments before speaking. "Do you remember when Dad taught us how to ride bicycles?" Claire smiled faintly. "You were scared to take your training wheels off." Emma laughed through her tears. "I cried for 2 days." Claire nodded. "Dad finally took them off without telling you." Emma smiled sadly. "I was so angry at him." Claire looked at her. "But you learned to ride." Emma slowly nodded. "I think Mom became my training wheels after Dad died." Claire remained silent. "She loved me so much that she never let me fall," Emma continued. "The problem is, I never learned how to get back up by myself." Claire felt tears forming in her own eyes. "It's not too late." Emma looked toward the driveway, where Jake's car had been parked. "Do you think he'll forgive me?" Claire answered honestly. "I think he'll forgive you if he sees real change, not promises. Change." Emma took a long, deep breath. "Then I need to start today." She stood up, walked inside, and headed straight to the guest room. Judith looked surprised. "What are you doing?" Emma picked up her suitcase. "I'm going to the apartment." Judith immediately stood. "But it's tiny. You and Lily will barely have space." Emma smiled weakly. "Maybe that's exactly what I need." Judith's eyes filled with tears. "I was only trying to protect you." Emma hugged her mother tightly. "I know, Mom, but protecting me isn't the same as preparing me." Judith began crying quietly. "I'm sorry." Emma kissed her mother's cheek, picked up Lily, grabbed the last suitcase, and walked toward the front door. Before leaving, she turned to Claire. "I don't expect you to forgive me today, but thank you for finally saying no." Claire walked over and hugged her sister for the first time since everything began. "Go build your life, Emma. I'll always be cheering for you, but I won't live it for you." Emma smiled through her tears and walked out the front door. Claire stood in the doorway watching her sister drive away. For the first time in weeks, the house was completely quiet. She thought the hardest part was finally over. She had no idea that later that evening, Judith would return alone, with a confession that would change everything Claire believed about her mother. That evening, just as the sun disappeared behind the trees, Claire heard another knock at the front door. She opened it and found Judith standing there alone. She wasn't carrying groceries or folders. Her eyes were red, and she looked older than Claire had ever seen her. "Can I come in?" Judith asked softly. Claire stepped aside without saying a word. They sat in the living room in complete silence for several minutes. Finally, Judith took a deep breath. "I owe you the truth." Claire looked at her but didn't interrupt. Judith stared at the floor. "After your father died, I was terrified." Her voice trembled. "I was afraid of losing both of you. You became so independent so quickly. You never asked me for anything. But Emma, she still needed me." Claire listened quietly. At first, helping her felt like being a good mother. Then it became a habit. Every time she made a mistake, I stepped in because I couldn't bear to watch her struggle. I told myself I was protecting her. Tears filled Judith's eyes. I didn't realize I was teaching her that someone else would always fix her problems. Claire reached over and gently held her mother's hand. "Mom, I know you loved her." Judith nodded. "But I failed both of my daughters. I leaned on you because you were responsible, and I smothered Emma because I thought she was fragile. Neither of you got the mother you deserved." Claire felt tears run down her own face. "You don't have to carry all of that by yourself anymore." Judith looked at her. "Can you forgive me?" Claire smiled through her tears. "I already have." Judith covered her face and cried. For the first time in years, they weren't arguing. They weren't choosing sides. They were simply a mother and daughter finally being honest with each other. A few weeks later, Claire received a phone call from Jake. "I thought you'd like an update," he said. Claire smiled. "How are things?" Jake laughed softly. "Different. Emma has been showing up to work every single day. She even picked up extra shifts." Claire felt proud. "Really?" "She sold almost all of her designer handbags," Jake continued. "She paid off 2 credit cards already, and yesterday she made a budget without me asking." Claire couldn't hide her smile. "That's amazing." Jake's voice became emotional. "You know what she told me?" "What?" "She said the best thing anyone ever did for her was finally stop rescuing her." Claire looked out the window at her peaceful backyard. "I'm happy for both of you. We also wanted to invite you over for dinner next weekend," Jake said. "Emma's cooking." She insisted. Claire laughed. "I'll be there." The following Saturday, Claire drove to their small studio apartment. It was nothing like her house. The living room and kitchen shared the same tiny space, and Lily's little bed fit neatly into one corner. But the apartment was spotless. There were no shopping bags, no unopened boxes, no overdue bills lying around. Emma opened the door with a warm smile. "Welcome." Claire hugged her tightly. During dinner, Lily proudly announced that her mummy went to work every day now. Everyone laughed. After the meal, Emma handed Claire a small envelope. "What's this?" Claire asked. "Open it." Inside was a house key. Claire looked confused. Emma smiled. "It's not your spare key. It's ours." Claire looked even more confused. Emma continued. "It's the key to our apartment. I wanted to ask your permission before giving it to you." Claire smiled as tears filled her eyes again. "Are you sure?" Emma nodded. "Because now I understand something I never understood before. A key isn't just a piece of metal. It's trust, and trust should never be taken without permission." Claire hugged her sister once more. Several months later, Claire hosted another family barbecue. This time, everyone gathered in the backyard laughing and sharing stories. Judith helped set the table, but before moving anything, she smiled and asked, "Where would you like me to put these?" Claire laughed. "Anywhere you'd like, Mom." Judith smiled. "No, it's your home." Emma and Jake arrived carrying homemade dessert instead of moving boxes. Lily ran straight into Claire's arms. As the evening came to an end, Claire walked everyone to the front door. Judith paused before stepping outside and looked at the welcome mat that read, "Home begins here." She smiled at Claire. "You know, I used to think a home was a place where everyone could come whenever they wanted." Claire looked at her mother. "And now?" Judith smiled. "Now I know a home is a place where love and respect live together." Claire hugged her tightly. After everyone left, she closed the front door and locked it. She looked around her quiet home. It finally felt peaceful again. Not because it was empty, but because everyone who entered now understood that love doesn't ignore boundaries. Real love respects them. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone isn't rescuing them. Sometimes it's believing they're strong enough to stand on their own. And that was the day Claire finally realized that protecting her peace didn't cost her family. It helped save it. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. What would you have done if you were Claire? Would you have let your family stay, or would you have set boundaries too? Remember, helping the people you love is a beautiful thing, but true love should never come at the cost of losing your peace. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Nenya Folktales, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our emotional stories filled with betrayal, karma, love, and powerful life lessons. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next story.